Hi everyone, welcome. I am very excited to introduce my guest today. We have Whitney Uland, who is a queer filmmaker and Jane of all trades, whose talents include acting, directing, writing, and producing. She also owns Abundant Artist Coaching, which is a mentorship and mindset coaching program for artists and creatives ready to create a full-time income from their artistic passions. Hi Whitney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a delight to be
So tell me a little bit about your story. I was on your website. I've heard about your work before, and I know everyone in my audience is just so going to resonate with your story and your work. So yeah, I want to hear, like, obviously you started out trying to make it as an artist in New York, and then like really, had your season pass to the struggle bus, and like it was not going well. And then you turned it all around and you created the success that you had envisioned in your own way. So I would love to hear, like really what it took for you to go from feeling like it's just not happening to starting to see some of the results that you'd always dreamed of creating.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a very generous intro. I think you really hit the nail on the head. I had graduated. I had, my BFA in musical theater was like ready to go, move to New York, and about 100 auditions in, I still had not booked anything. I mean, I was like on the hustle train, like waking up at 4 a.m., go sign up, audition, like, and I wasn't booking anything. After about, it was like that, because I remember I like made a post. I was like, it's 100 auditions, like, and I'm still going for it. And it had only been like, I don't know, 6 months. And the next day, my dad told me that he'd been diagnosed with leukemia and that he had a very short time before he was going to pass. And so I immediately moved home and was fortunate enough to be able to take care of him until he did pass away. And then I had been there at home for long enough that I probably would have benefited mentally from staying there and continue to process and grieve. But it was like, I think like 5 days after his funeral, I was like, I've got to get back to New York. Like, it's like, it was just such a heavy place. And as you can imagine, my auditions didn't go well when I was in that place. And I was trying to keep up with that momentum. And it just like my mental and emotional health hit a complete rock bottom. And I remember literally crying one night in bed and just being like, I just want to be on set. Like, all I want is to be acting, to be doing what I love. And sure enough, the next day I get an email that I had been booked in something, and there probably were a lot of red flags about it, like the fact that I hadn't auditioned, but I was like, oh, who cares, I booked something. And I go and I get there. Well, and then I find out that it's a student film. And I'm like, okay, no worries. I'm not above doing student work. I'm like, Columbia has a great program, NYU, like all these programs I haven't even heard of. It was an art school that I hadn't heard of. And I'm like, that's great. I'm going to network. I'm not above this. I really just need something. And I get there and it's a high school student film. And I was just like, oh no, oh no. And I and to make matters worse, I get there, and because these are, 16-year-olds, they hadn't read my full resume, didn't realize that I'm 5'10", and I am like full head taller than their male lead, who was also probably 16. And they were just like, this is not going to work. And so they fired me from a high school
No.
film set. And I just was like, you know what? I didn't know that it could get worse. And yet here we are. And I think that was just the moment that I was like, okay, all of this hustle, all of this grinding and being like, I cannot continue to make art from this place, and I have nothing left to draw from. And that, like, I don't believe in coincidences, but we'll say as luck would have it, I heard this podcast, and it was from a life coach, Brooke Castillo, and she just really taught about using your mindset to create results, and how creating that foundation in your mental and emotional health is what enables you to go create results in your life. So it was so transformative for me. I ended up starting writing my own work, producing it, winning awards, getting signing with top agents, like being able, and even at the time I had been working, I was making $12 an hour at a day job, like working shitty hours. And I like, it was like not in a safe place. So I had to take a cab there and back. I was leaving with like 12, like I had only made $12 by the time I paid for the cab and like my lunch there. Um, and it really changed my entire life, and I became so passionate about it. Like it felt like I had a cure to cancer. It was how like passionate I became about it. And so I ended up certifying as a life coach and building this practice. And I think I had been in the community long enough that people just were able to see that something in me had shifted, and that I was in a bad place, and now all of a sudden I was having results come to me, and opportunities and money and things like that. And so I was really able to just build my business on like word of mouth, by people being like, there's something in the water that she's got. And yeah, it's just, I don't even remember your question. So I hope that I answered it. But that, I guess, has been my journey of really always, we always think that we have goals, right? And we think that we'll feel a certain way once we hit that goal. We think I'll feel, let's say financially dependent, or I'm sorry, financially supported. I'll feel successful. I'll feel, whatever it is, whether it's, you're wanting to hit a certain MRR in revenue, or you're trying to like book a Broadway show. You think that getting there is what's going to make you feel successful. And the truth of it is, when you feel like something outside of you is going to give you those feelings, there's a part of you that's showing up from lack. And that is it sounds woo woo, but it's like a repulsive energy. I mean, I think you kind of can imagine, like, if you're on a date with someone and they're all of your type, they're super hot, they're attractive, they're successful, they're good conversationalist, and they have everything going for them. But then you leave the date and they start texting you like way too often. You're like, there's something funky going on here. And I think that we do that with our businesses or with our creative pursuits, whatever they are, is we start to be that needy, graspy person, and the energy is just off. And that's when you can see, people that have, it's like they have all of the business set up, or they have the resume, they have the talent, they have the training, and yet something's not quite landing. It's usually because you have these blocks that are kind of like invisible success blockers that are keeping you from creating the life and the goals and the career that you want. So the work of it is always continuing to fill your own cup and continue to believe that you're successful, believe that you're, enough ahead of time, and letting that create the results for you. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. I just like word vomited so much.
No, totally. And I love your story so much, because you're just like living proof of really like what I preach, which is that having a coaching business is just like, I think, the most supportive like way to have an income to support a creative career, because you are constantly working through those blocks, like you say, and just mindset and energy, like emotional health, like physical wellness. And like my story was that I was working on film crews, and I was just like booking loads of work, but I was looking at all the heads of department, and I was like, that's just not where I want to be. Like, I don't want to spend my whole life working on film crews. And then I had a big burnout, and I just knew I wanted to do something more creatively fulfilling. And that I just, like randomly pivoted into starting out as a copywriter. And then I discovered the coaching industry because I was getting all these coaching clients. And then I launched my coaching business. And that, the vision behind my business was always to have an income that was fun, that was fulfilling, that was, bringing me so much growth and so much support in the work, and creating more and more time freedom for me to create. And so, I finally got to that place now where I like recovered my health. I'm writing my book. I've been working on music projects, and I just think coaching is like the perfect like collaborator for creatives. And there's so much crossover between performers and coaching. And when you have breakthroughs in one areas, you always start to see breakthroughs in the other areas, even if you're not like directly working on them through your business as well. So I love, love, love that you're here to share this success story, that like this gets to work. You can have a thriving coaching business, and you can have a thriving creative career at the same time. So I'm really curious, in your work with artists, like this whole idea of like the struggling artist, right? Like you've lived it, like it's, it is a trope, and it's there for a reason. Why? Like, why? What are the biggest reasons why you see artists struggling with money? And I know you've already like touched on it, but I would love to see like what are some of the main trends that
Yeah.
cause the struggling artist mentality.
Yeah, so it's really comes down to three things. So the first one is that we have our brains are wired for survival. So if you think about like humans, we've evolved from the ancestors of like cavemen, cave women, right? And their job was just to stay safe, right? Don't go out of your tribe, don't go out of the community, don't, because then you would be susceptible to bears. If you get hurt, you're going to run out of water, like you're going to die, right? And so for our caveman ancestors, leaving and doing something on their own felt vulnerable, and so their brains would say like that will kill you, do not do it. Well, our brains have that exact same mechanism, right? And so, and yet we're not actually in constant of threat of bears or lions or becoming dehydrated in the wilderness, right? But the way that it manifests today is the artists that I work with, and artists who are struggling artists typically have not come from artists families, right? And so what happens is when you're creating work, you're creating what I call like it's an like, and I have a baby, so this is like me saying this. Your art is your baby, right? Like I always say, like my movie was my firstborn, my baby was my second, and it's so our art feels so vulnerable, and to go out and put it into the world is the equivalent of a caveman leaving the cave, right? We're doing something that our family has not done. We're doing something that our society is like just I'm guessing that every single person who listens to your podcast had some point where they said, I want to be, X, Y, and Z kind of artist. And someone said, oh, so you're going to be a waiter full time, or made some joke about, but what's your backup plan? Or what are you really going to do? Right. And those things trigger our literal survival mechanisms and convince us that we should not go after them. And so we create these invisible success blockers that tell us, and our brains also, this is the fun thing, is that, oh, as creatives we're so creative, and anytime that your strength gets overused, it becomes your biggest weakness. And so our brains find these really creative ways to sabotage us. So instead of saying, and the easiest one is like, oh well, artists can't make money. Like, I thought that I had to make $12 an hour because that's what I saw all of my artist friends doing. And it wasn't until I had a friend who said, oh, I just got this job doing social media, I have full benefits, $60,000 a year, that I was like, wait, that's possible for me, right? And so our brains just are going to look at what feels safe, but our brains will also feel anytime, and this is with anything that you want to do that's new, your brain is going to tell you you're not good enough, you can't, it's going to be confused about how to do it, it's going to get overwhelmed with the possibility, and it's going to, our brains find really creative ways to just stop us from doing it. So we have this primal instinct. Second is the societal pressure of, we are mavericks in society, we're doing things that no one else is doing, we're saying things. I mean, I'm terrified of my work going out in the world because my mom's going to hate it, right? Like she's going to be like, well, I thought you swore too much and like shouldn't have, whatever. And those things affect us at a subconscious level. And then third is past pain, right? So anytime you've been rejected, anytime that you have failed, your brain is just compiling more and more evidence of why you can't have it. And these things all happen at a subconscious level, but they keep us stuck. They keep us struggling. And so the way that this really manifests in money, the thought that I see, and I've worked with like over 150 artists, and it becomes such a thing that in my program, we work on money mindset for an entire month of the program because it's such a thing for artists, because we're told you're going to be poor or you're going to be a celebrity, right? And there's one or the other, and there's no in between. And the messaging that happens a lot is just this, the like most generalized way is like, I'm bad with money, right? Or artists can't make money. It's kind of this thought, this subconscious belief that we have. And of course we've built, and so then what happens is when we have these stories, we build evidence for them. So when you have this thought, let's say it's I'm bad with money, you feel insecure or overwhelmed. And let's say you have a goal where you want to save or you want to invest, or you want, like in your brain, you're thinking, I want to make or ask for more money from my clients, or ask for, higher day rates or whatever it is. But you have this programming of like, I'm bad at money, or I'm not worthy of it, or something. And then you feel insecure, you feel overwhelmed. And from that place, we take actions that just perpetuate this thought that we're bad with money. So some of the things that I see specifically with money and with the inability to save are, a lot of the time when people are feeling insecure, what happens is we're trying to solve for that emotion, and we're trying to prove to ourselves that we are not bad with money. And so then by resisting it, we just go in the opposite direction. And so a lot of the time we'll over save. So something that I see a lot is like, especially clients who have credit card debt, they're like, I'm bad with money, but it's because I have this debt, so I'm going to overpay the debt. And then by the end of the month, they don't have enough money, so they have to charge their card again, right? It's these reactionary things, or avoiding looking at statements. So that's something I see a lot. Or just avoiding making the small simple changes because they think that they need to overhaul everything, right? Instead of just looking at a budget or looking at the trends and saying, like, what are some little ways that I can cut back? Like, what are things I don't value? We're making financial decisions from our emotions, which are all coming from these thoughts of, I'm bad with this, I don't know what I'm doing. And all of those actions are what create the result of being kind of bad at money, right? And so then it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, and it becomes this loop where then we have more and more evidence from it, and we just like really start to believe it and internalize it. And over time, it really can take a toll on your self-worth and on like everything. Like, and then debt grows and you just feel terrible, and all the things. So that that's how.
It's a lot. There's a lot going on there, right? And it takes work. I can speak from experience. Like, I've been working on this for a really fucking long time, and I'm still doing the work, and like it works. It works. The small improvements add up, and then you're like, oh, like my stress levels are like in a whole other place. My financial reality is in a whole other place than I was like a year ago, 2 years ago. So thank you for sharing. There were so many great nuggets of wisdom in there. I would love to know, like, what come to mind for you for some of those breakthrough moments where like you recognize there was like an unconscious fear of rejection, and then you like actually went through rejection and it was like really freaking painful, or like some of those moments where those patterns were broken for you. Was there anything that stands out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit of a like, I guess the way that I like to think about it is I am not a huge fan of feel the fear and like go all in on it anyway. Like, kind of that, what's that word for it? Like the therapy, exposure therapy to fear, I think obviously works, but I'm just like a weenie about it. And so I'm a big fan of creating the safety so that the fear doesn't seem as manageable, right? And or feels manageable. And I'm trying to think, I could use this example from yesterday. I'm working on getting new representation, and had this whole, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what I'm doing, this is all the imposter syndrome things. And the first thing is just to kind of notice those fears. But then the second thing that I help, or that helps me, and instead of just being like, well, I'm just going to send the emails anyway, but instead to stop and give myself compassion for those fears, and tell myself, like, yeah, this makes sense, this is really vulnerable, like this is scary, it makes sense, you've been dropped before, you've had bad experiences with agents, like it makes sense that this is hard and scary for you. And then just to process that fear, right? Like coming and tuning into your body and like making peace with it in your nervous system. For me, that is what helps the most, so that it's not like I'm like gaslighting myself and being like, take action anyway. It's like, no, let's create safety in our own body so that we feel safe enough to keep taking risks over and over. And so by doing that work, and it took, half the day or more to like sit with it and process it and give myself compassion. And then once I got to a place where I was like, okay, I'm feeling good, then I was able to like write the emails or whatever. And I think it happens the same, anything new and anything scary that you're doing. If it's, making investments in, I'm sure, like, hiring you as a coach and making those kinds of investments, things like that, it's scary. And I think by giving yourself the compassion for that and processing that, it can give you like a softer place to land that makes it easier to take actions advocating for what you want.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's really true. That's true for me, and I think so many creators who are just like highly sensitive people. It's like we're not going to do the push through. It's either going to be like resistance and procrastination, like, or compassion, or otherwise it doesn't get done
Totally.
unless we really care for ourselves in that way. Because we'll just, I've had like visibility fear has been a big one for me, like fear of rejection. It's like one
Same.
of my core things, and I'll literally have things on my to-do list for like years and not even be cognizant that I'm in resistance around it. Like it took me 2 years to
Yeah.
get my first website up, and then starting to do like press outreach and things like that. Like I will have things on my to-do list and then it'll just fall off, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, like I just don't want to, that's just not the strategy for me or whatever. And then it'll come back around and be like, oh no, you were
Yeah.
just like really freaking scared. And that's why you didn't do it.
Right. Well, and I love what you were saying, like, how you're like, "Yeah, this is kind of my thing," right? Is I'm guessing that you had different levels of that resistance, right? First is the website, and then it's the press, right? For me, it's like with ads. That's been a huge thing that I'm like, "Well, I'm just like, these people are just internet trolls. Like, I don't want them to see, or whatever it is." And I think having these tools that or that we're talking about is what helps you continue to like heal internally, which helps you then to create bigger and bigger impact and bigger results. Because I bet you've seen this a lot also with like artists and creatives. It's like the thing that we're opening ourselves up to visibility, and that's like such a vulnerable thing for us. Like probably more than other people. I don't know.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think it's really important because sometimes when you do this exercise, right, and it's like, well, what are you afraid of? And then you name all of the fears. And then it's like, what is the likelihood of that going to happen? And some of them, it's like, that's probably never going to happen. But, genuinely, we're like, witches reincarnated. Like the messages that we're bringing are going to trigger people. Some people aren't going to like it. Some people actually may judge and attack us. And
Yes.
that's a reality that we're stepping into with our work when we are working to shift the narratives around things and, deconstruct power structures. And there are people who aren't going to like what it is that we have to share. And so I think it's really important, like you say, to name that and to have compassion for that process. And most importantly, build support around it, which is why, having really strong communities, people who get what you're going through, people to fall back on so that you can process these things, if the worst
Yeah.
case scenario does unfold.
Totally. And well, and I love, like, I think it's so helpful for people to hear, you talking about that as someone who is successful and just saying like it's so helpful to have that normalized and to have people that can hold space for that and who just being able to see that, oh, I'm not crazy for being afraid of this. Like, because I feel like sometimes I'm talking to my husband, he's like, it's just a YouTube video, just put it out there, right? And I'm like, no, 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 I've been bullied before on the internet. Like it's like a scary thing for me. And so to be around and in community with people that understand that, I think is such a gift.
Yes, I love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Please tell everybody, like, what are you working on at the moment? Where can people find you and find out more about your work?
Yeah, best place to find me is at Whitney Uland, just on Instagram. It's kind of where I keep all the links. But I've my feature film, The Cosmos Sisters, releases on December 20th. It's an independent dark comedy that I wrote, directed, and starred in. And my coaching program, Abundant Artist Coaching, you can also find out about on my Instagram.
Amazing. Congrats on your film. That sounds epic. I can't wait to see it. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
For more inspirational content, head over to my website withsarahmac.com and please support the show by liking, commenting, and subscribing.